So you resumed your university studies when you came back, and I believe, among others, you had Dr. Herbert Everett as one of your lecturers, and I know that didn't impress you. Before the war, I considered in constitutional law.
It was in 1941, before I went into the Air Force in May.
So you had occasion to meet with him again later on, I know.
Well, I appear before him.
Yes.
Yes, when he was an intellectual husk. It was so sad. Because although he was a controversial character, he was a man in his time of great ability, and by the time he became Chief Justice, he was intellectually worn out. He sat on the bench and didn't know what was going on. I've dealt with that in one of these papers.
Other lecturers you recall at university whose style you admired or whose ideas impressed you?
Bernard Sugarman, before whom I appeared many times when he was a judge, lectured me in contracts in my first year, 1941. He had a rather dull mode of delivery, but he was a good, very deliberate lawyer. He was not a great advocate, but he became, in my view, a very competent, albeit rather slow judge. And I used to see him occasionally when I was in practice and he was on the bench around Bellevue Hill, because he lived not far from me. He was a good servant of the law, I think. But not a man of immense vitality. He did a lot of government work during the war. I don't say that disparagingly. And he became a silk. But he was, as counsel, never a shining light. But a good judge, very fair, and pleasant it was to appear in his court.
During those years of study at university after the war, were there many women studying law at the same time you were?
Mari Kinsella, Moya Browning, those are the ones I remember in my year after the war, second year. She was the daughter of a judge, Edward Parnell Kinsella, for whom I appeared often, and Moya Browning, who married a solicitor.
So then you became an associate, I understand.
That was in 1948, when I was in final year.
To Bill Owen?
Yes, William Owen, yeah.
During that year, you also met John Slattery, who was at that time an associate. Fredericks Jordan.
I met him in December 1945.
Oh, earlier then, yes.
When he was Jordan's associate. When I went to Government House to be interviewed by the Rhodes Selection Committee, he received me and took me into the Chief Justice, to the committee, presided over by Sir Frederick Jordan. That was when I first met him. And of course we used to, much later when I was at the bar, and he was very prominent at the common law bar. We did cases against each other, and I've always had a great affection and admiration of him. He was a very good counsel and became a first-rate judge.
And had a very distinguished career of his own.
Yeah, he did.
I'll just stop the tape for 1 second. So continuing on, I believe in 1949, the momentous day of 11th of February 1949, you were admitted to the bar, and Bruce McFarlane moved your admission. That's right. And he had been a friend of your father's too, I believe. Or at least was highly regarded by your father.
Yes, and they were friends, but not close friends. My father used to brief him, and they had a very good professional association. I talk about him in this...
He was a very upright sort of individual?
Yes, very hard worker, not by any means a scintillating advocate, but he'd always done his work and presented a good argument. Indeed, he led me in one of the early cases I did in the High Court in 1955. It was a case in which some road hauliers who were clients of my brother challenged the state legislation which challenged the constitutional validity of the State Transport Barring of Claims Act, which the state government at the time enacted in order to prevent road hauliers who had paid an illegal tax declared unlawful by the Privy Council ultimately in one of the Hughes and Vale cases, tried to bar claims, and we said that was contrary to Section 92, and Barwick appeared for some co-plaintiffs. That was when I first, well no, not the first time, the second time I came in professional contact with Barwick. And Bruce McFarlane led me, and we were successful in the High Court. Then there was an application for special leave to appeal to the Privy Council, in which I appeared, and rather surprisingly, given the force of the High Court's judgment, the Privy Council granted special leave. I then parted from the case because other counsel became involved, and other counsel and other solicitors became involved, and in due course the Privy Council, in a 2.5-page judgment, upheld the High Court in very firm language. So that was that case.
Yes, it was. I was interested to know what you felt about appearing before the Privy Court, because Privy Council, beg your pardon. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. No. What was it like? Because it doesn't happen anymore, of course.
No, well, I did 2 cases in 1985. Each was a defamation case. One was for Clive Lloyd, the great cricketer, and the other was for a very brave litigant who was awarded $60,000 by a jury, was taken away in the Court of Appeal, and we got it back in the Privy Council. Both those appeals were heard in October 1985. What was it like to appear in the Privy Council?
I can't imagine you being daunted, but were you?
No, it was very pleasant. A very courteous lot of people, a lot of judges. I did several cases in the Privy Council over the years and greatly enjoyed the experience. I had the good fortune to appear before people like Lord Wilberforce, who was a descendant of the great Samuel Wilberforce, so prominent in the fight against slavery.
A good friend of William Pitt.
Yes. He was a man of enormous intellectual attainments. No, they were a very pleasant tribunal to appear before, and I was very lucky to have so much work there.